This panel, we're going to talk about the different aspects of card and money movement. And we have Chris Como and John Stecky. Chris is the general manager and head of products, cards and money movement. Chris leads the card and money movement business, which provides issue processing solutions, value-added services, network and money movement services to over 6,000 clients. And then we have John Stuckey, who is the head of product management, digital business banking. John leads the product management team for Digital One Business Banking that provides banks, business customers with online and mobile access to their banking services, including account management, payment and money movement, reporting, insights, and a whole host of other connected banking services. So thanks, Chris and John, for joining. So Chris, let me start the discussion with you. Since the pandemic, we've seen a big shift to digital payments across the markets. The FIS Global Payments report published a couple of months earlier talked about how A2A payments are taking off, digital wallet growth continuing to accelerate, the BNPL continuing to be popular and likely to see sustained growth, and e-commerce growth continuing to remain robust across all markets. But there's also kind of disruption coming in the form of biometric payments, the machine-to-machine payments, the metaverse payments, and so on. So can you talk a little bit about how some of the FIS priorities in this space and what FIS is doing to innovate in the card and digital payment space, and what are some of the topics that are on top of our customers' minds?
Sure. Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. I know there is a ton of innovation. I think, to me, I kind of put it in two different buckets, but it's sort of driven by different factors. Like on one side, I think a lot of innovation is driven by our end customers, so meaning like cardholders or folks with accounts. What's their expectation of their banking or fintech servicer? To me, that's driven off just the rise of folks using their iPhone or Android phone, the expectation of shopping at Amazon, or moving from getting in and out of taxis to just ordering your Uber and you have no idea you've paid for it as you stepped out. Sort of like that consumer experience, I think, drives a lot of innovation and change. I think the other side of it is sort of like back office infrastructure. What I mean by that is, like, when I think about where cards, money movement started, like a lot of the technical processes we have in place were competing with like physical process. So when you think of like, the 70s and 80s, 90s, is like this stuff was all built. The competition was like paper-based processing centers that were like these big office towers with, hundreds of thousands of people like manually processing through things. And therefore, like real time, but whereas it's like faster payments was like we got settlement done in 3 days, as opposed to today where we're focusing on more like instant settlement. So I sort of like take those two. I think on the front end, sort of consumer experiences, a lot of that when I think about at least my business, and I know John can opine on his, in my space, a lot of that front end is owned by our clients typically. So for us at FIS, we're really focused on enablement and making it as like seamless and easy as possible for them to develop and create the different experiences they want, which means that's like APIs in the Code Connect world. That's like creating partnerships where, we may work with fintechs, and it's more of like an embedded finance play where we're creating the technical interconnectivity between a bank and a fintech. All of that, though, is driving sort of like new experiences that fundamentally like we at FIS may not own, but we need to understand it in order to help enable it. And then when I think of sort of like back-end infrastructure and speed, you think of today enabling consumers to be able to use like Zelle for instant peer-to-peer payments, or like RTP, or generally like real-time payments. I'm thinking sort of like U.S. market, FedNow, RTP from the clearinghouse. Those are all like very back-end technical infrastructure type work that creates a really cool consumer experience. But a lot of the time we're working on deep in the tech stack, and like how do we interact with for Zelle, things like EWS, and making sure we've got like the right payment loads and dealing with fraud and whatnot. So to me, I think a lot of the innovation in my mind is focused on sort of like front end, which is sort of that API layer, and then back end, it's a lot of like sort of authorization and settlements, sort of super payment geeky stuff that ultimately the end consumer doesn't see, but it creates some pretty cool experiences in the end. So that's kind of how I think about the innovation priorities.
Okay. And so you talked about the front end, where you talk about the customer experience, and then, on the back end infrastructure where the customer does not see, like the fraud solution, the settlement aspect of it, the other things that you talked about. So are these the things that our customers are also asking us, to prioritize? Or, in your conversation with customers, are you kind of getting the feeling that these are the things that you're looking for, kind of an embedded journey of all the things, the card and money movement and banking. Is that what you're seeing when you interact with customers?
Oh, for sure. I think every customer, the first question they ask is like, what's our digital journey? How can we enable the best possible experience? I typically am working with a bank, bank is, they're focused on like, how do I create that wonderful experience I see at Capital One or JP Morgan Chase, right? So a lot of that's about the front end, and the question then becomes like, well, walk me through your strategy, walk me through your API capabilities, what type of test sandbox you have, et cetera. So it's all like sort of, how do I interact with you, FIS, to create that type of experience? And then I think just given the move toward like real-time payments and changes in backend infrastructure, everyone's curious, like, are we enabling FedNow? Is it integrated with our different payment platforms, RTP, sort of similarly? So yeah, I think when I think about clients, those are kind of the front end exciting things they're focused on. And then everything else is like, are you going to make sure that you're compliant? We worry about fraud, a lot of like the sort of blocking and tackling that I think happens in the payments world.
Okay. Yeah. So just on the FIS has many partnership with fintechs, like you mentioned the Zelle partnership on our mobile app solutions for instant money transfer in US, and then we have Volt, where we are bringing the open banking to merchants, partnership in crypto space. Can you talk about some of those partnerships we have in the fintechs in the card and money movement space, in general?
Yeah, I put them in kind of like three different buckets. There's the partners that we have that drive huge portion of our business that I don't think anyone like, well, they call themselves fintechs. I'm not sure we would, but that's like the Visa, MasterCard, Fair Isaac, IBM does a lot of our fraud work. There's a bunch of those really, really big partners that without them, we would not be successful. So I feel like compelled to put them in the bucket of like really strong and deep partnerships. They help us innovate. They help us drive go to market. I think there's then another group that are kind of like behind the scenes. If I think about like our bill payment business, we do a lot with BillGo. Like in our embedded finance work, like Treasury Prime. There's a bunch of partners that I think are really, really strong and like sort of help us enable and create new experiences. And then there's a bunch you mentioned, sort of like blockchain distributed ledger technology, like M10 is one that I know we've done a bunch of work globally around CBDCs. So I look at it as like from a partnership standpoint, we are always open to partnership. There's things that we are phenomenal in, and there's things that we look and we're like, we either don't have the experience or there's like just a better mousetrap that's been built by someone else, and therefore we're happy to engage and partner. But they fall in sort of those two big buckets of like the big massive partners that we have, and then a number of sort of point solutions that we work really closely with.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Chris. Let me come to you, John. When we come to payments, there is a lot of shift to instant payments, right? And there are various national schemes for real-time payments in the US. We have Zelle and RTP network. FedNow is coming that Chris mentioned. There is PIX in Brazil. There is UPI in India, PayNow in Singapore, and so on. There are some cross-border use cases as well, where, for example, in UPI in India has partnered with PayNow in Singapore, where the participants can actually make cross-border payments and transfer instantly between these two countries, right? So when it comes to real-time payments, especially A2A, whether it's domestic payments or disbursements or cross-border remittances or B2B payments, what are some of the things that FI is doing in this space, and what are the partnership opportunities in this space of fintechs?
So within our digital banking space, right, we're on the opposite end of Chris. So as Chris is building all of these back-end payment infrastructure, we're then taking those and connecting those into a front end for the bank, right? So the Digital One product is essentially the online and mobile banking experience for consumers and businesses. And so we work really closely with Chris and his team and help provide some input on what we think roadmaps should look like for our banking clients. And I'll tell you, the banks, there is not a meeting that we have with banks where they don't want to understand what is our instant payments strategy, right? And we've kind of moved towards calling it instant payments instead of real-time payments, because with real-time payments you get the confusion of RTP from the clearinghouse versus the FedNow. So we've been kind of calling it instant payments, and it's gotten to be a big enough of a deal where we've now put together an entire specific strategy for the banks and roadmap to show them this is our instant payments journey that we're bringing to you over the next couple of years. But it's funny, I think, we primarily serve regional and community banks, and they know that they need instant payments, but their reasoning is more because the big banks have them, and they don't want to be left behind when the big banks have them and they don't. Where they need help is understanding what are the key use cases that they can use to kind of meet their end user needs, whether it's consumers or businesses. It's easier, frankly, I think, on the consumer side where P2P kind of dominates things. And they also want to understand how they can monetize it, because the reality is a lot of the traditional payments have made a nice revenue flow for banks over the years. And so there's a little bit of nervousness in terms of, are there ways for us to add value-added services to instant payments so that we serve the needs of our customers and build new revenue streams off of it? And so for me, that's a great space for partnership, right? Are there interesting fintechs out there that have come up with ancillary services around instant payments to either focus on specific niche use cases that we can drive into something bigger to create transaction revenue? Or I'll tell you a great one, right? Instant payments creates opportunities for fraud. And we've seen that a lot in Zelle. Zelle got a black eye over the last couple of years around fraud. That's not going to go away. It doesn't go away with RTP and FedNow. So those fintechs that have strong and unique ways to address real-time fraud is another really important piece that I think that we look for. In addition to that, most of what we do in our digital banking space is domestic-based real-time payments. But there are great opportunities out there for things like international remittance, right? There's a huge amount of dollars that leave the U.S. to go out to countries outside our borders, and those could be expats that are in the U.S. sending money back to their families. That's one of the biggest use cases for those. We don't really address that market need today. So that would be a great example where partnering with a fintech could allow us to tap into some of those other instant payment networks that are around the globe. They can act as an orchestration layer for us to be able to distribute that kind of global wide and serve that remittance need. And then we're always looking at what are the other, just in general, cross-border payments. If you've got a business that has vendors that are overseas, what's the best way to get that money across in an instant way? Those are certainly things that we look for too. I'll tell you another really important one to me, and this is both for just real-time payments in general, but also specifically on some of the cross-border payments, is fintechs that have come up with clever ways to use either the ISO 20022 messaging to really provide some more robust data that goes along with the payments, and how can people leverage that data to make business operations and consumers' lives easier. And then another piece is distributed ledger technology, right? So in the past, there's always been difficulty with great transparency when it comes to international payments. And are there interesting things that fintech partners could do with the distributed ledger technology to, again, simplify, enable new use cases, enable new revenue streams? Those are things that I think are interesting to me.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks, John. So John, like we have a lot of APIs that we have exposed in our Code Connect platform, right? Like, so if the fintechs can add to that to our service or to add to our API stack, then they're essentially building a solution on top of our ecosystem. In which case we can then partner with them and help our customers have that value-added offering, whether it's payments, money movement, insights, account management solutions, and so on, right? So is that a model that we are looking at? You mentioned some of the cross-border use cases, and there was an example about inward remittances, for example, from US to India or to some of the Asia Pacific countries, corporate payments, commercial payments. Is that an area that FIS can partner with fintech and have that win-win collaboration?
Yeah, so the API space in general is booming right now with embedded finance, with banking as a service, with payments as a service. FIS has invested heavily in that space. We had 3 divisions, and we created an entire 4th division, right, around delivery of APIs to fintechs. That's our platform division run by Tarun Bhatnagar. So that space is critical, right? How in that space, when it comes to delivering APIs to fintechs, how do you build out the sort of developer portals that have the assets and tools that really enable development, right? So that you're really thinking from a developer perspective and selling to a developer, not to a bank executive, which is kind of unique for FIS. It requires a different mindset. Also, whenever you're providing financial services APIs to fintechs, you've got to think through, there's got to be a regulated entity somewhere there. So there's got to be a piece of that that includes a sponsor bank or some other sort of regulated entity that helps facilitate anything related to money movement and regulated activity. So that's really important. In addition to that entire division, we also have a portion of our banking division, which is our banking API services business, which takes the same APIs as well as some APIs that have had orchestration layers connected to them to deliver directly to our banks or to our banks' direct partners. And so we are tackling that API space in multiple different ways. I think we still have an opportunity as well to start partnering with fintechs and start becoming a bit of a marketplace for fintech APIs. We don't have any specific strategies that we've executed on today around that space, but once we build out, kind of a tier 1 quadrant developer portal and tools, it only makes sense for us to help facilitate our fintech partners into the market by letting them leverage some of those same tools as well. So yeah, overall, I would say that the API space is critical to our strategy. One area that I'll specifically mention that's really important, I think we touch on it more in a later question, but I'm going to dive into it, I think, here just so that we do cover it, is when it comes to API delivery. I talked about the importance of fraud solutions when it comes to real-time payments, but on the flip side, regulatory technologies for embedded finance is absolutely critical. In fact, banks having trouble figuring out how to properly manage the regulatory environment in a banking as a service and embedded finance situation is one of the reasons that it hasn't taken off at the level that we think it could. We think it could be explosive, but there needs to be some regulatory technologies that are brought to play, and fintechs could absolutely play a part in that piece of it for sure.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, John. I think you touched upon the regulatory aspects, and we have this topic coming up in the embedded finance also talk about some of the PSD2 stuff and the regulations around the globe, and more of it's coming, like the FIDA regulation, the FTX APIs, and all that stuff. So that's an interesting topic that we are going to address in the embedded finance space. But coming back to you, Chris, on the cross-border payments, just remove that spotlight here. So cross-border payments, I think some of the considerations, like when we think about cross-border solutions, security, the AML, fraud, the time it takes to get the payment done, and so on, right? And CBDC is one of the solutions that's doubtless one of the solutions for solving some of these aspects. And there are different models available there. And according to the reports, we have 60% of central banks looking at digital currencies. And specifically in this area, the Asia Pacific region has a lot of pilots going on currently. And FIS also has a CBDC virtual lab created in collaboration with the M10 networks that you mentioned about, that allows the central banks and other commercial banks to kind of pilot and experiment a whole host of options, right? And it can support 1 million transactions per second currently. Can you talk about the FIS CBDC offering and how partners can take advantage of the FIS rails to build solutions on top of this? What are some of the exciting areas in the cross-border space that FIS is working on?
Yeah, sure. No, I'm happy to talk about it. I mean, I think it's one, I think it's a super exciting space. I mentioned earlier, like backend infrastructure is one of the things that's driving a lot of innovation. I think about where we are today, like even domestically, when we're doing settlement for most of our payment rails, it's, it's like a 24, 48 hour type experience. With the work we're doing with central banks, CBDC, or generally like looking at distributed ledger technology in our payments ecosystem, like that moves you from, like that 48-hour window to near real time. It's not, instantaneous, but it's near real time settlement. But even more importantly, I think John mentioned this earlier, like the level of transparency is drastically different. Like if you think about cross-border remittances or even domestic, like Visa, MasterCard, nice rails, like we think things are super transparent because we're like, there's a report you can run, or, it's like there's sort of these outputs from the system, but it's a whole different experience for someone playing in the ecosystem or a developer when you actually have the full chain access. You can see, where the ledger is at any given time. Like that level of transparency and ability to interoperate with like the sort of core payment rail is very, very different. So yeah, the work we're doing with M10 CBDC, I think, is really interesting. That obviously is more of like a central bank, so government sponsored blockchain-based tech, which I think as that becomes more and more ubiquitous, as more and more municipalities onboard and move to the CBDC world, it creates a huge amount of opportunity for cross-border interoperability with those blockchains, which I think like that is going to be the holy grail and the piece we're most excited about. It. Like I personally spent a lot of time with M10 looking at how we might replumb our US infrastructure, like sort of the FIS backend infrastructure, like how one could use blockchain technology, and it's really, really compelling. That the challenge with it is you have to get more like sort of ubiquitous adoption, right? Like there's pieces you can replumb independent. I think the CBDC thing is cool because that's a government saying like, I wish to go test the capability of minting coin directly on a chain. It's like centralized and controlled, and you also get sort of like regulatory requirement to use. They're all in pilot mode now, but as those move into more general availability, I think that'll be pretty exciting. So yeah, my easy answer is like, one, super excited about it. We got a lot of different pilots going on. I'd say there's other areas that we're looking at, where you might be able to innovate. I'd say it's a place that I talk across the ecosystem, and lots of our partners are doing the same. You can read announcements from like Visa or MasterCard or others. So it's not an area that folks are shying away from. I would have predicted last year that they were, simply because like CBDC blockchain tech was sort of all wrapped up with cryptocurrencies, and with like the explosion or implosion of a lot of those currencies, just from a valuation standpoint and speculation standpoint, I thought it would die out, but it still remains a conversation point with a lot of our clients and a lot of our partners, which I think is great, because I think it could drive a lot of sort of transparency and lower cost to deliver.
Sure, and I think there are a lot of conversation about privacy and what kind of CBDC do we have, whether that CBDC can earn interest and how does that happen. I think that's a whole different topic, I guess. So it's an interesting topic. I think there was an announcement from Fed also regarding some pilots for CBDCs. But again, I think we can that's a different topic. So thanks for the information on that one. So coming back to the the build versus partner versus buy kind of discussion. Obviously, we want to build what we can, partner with others where we can't build, and buy, where we see the capabilities as complementary and value add, right? So what are some of the areas in card and money movement space where we're looking, in that discussion of build versus partner versus buy? Chris, maybe you can go first, and then I can come to John.
Sure. Yeah, I wonder if John and I have different perspectives, but I'd say, I mean, for my business, a lot of that decision making is around. I mean, at a high level, it's ultimately, do we think FIS has like a better right to win, or it's like it's our natural capability set. So in cards and money movement, a lot of the things that we obviously are like, we will build this, are like backend infrastructure, our ability to manage and abstract away a lot of the complexities of the ISO messages, or network requirements, like all of that sort of Visa, MasterCard compliance stuff. We do a great job at making that simple on the front end. We obviously have like a whole waterfront of API capabilities with the intent that like that would be the waterfront. And then you look to partner on top of that. Doesn't mean we consume our own dog food. We use our Code Connect APIs for sure, but I look at that as like a pretty natural separation point. So if I go through the businesses, maybe a couple examples, like I think in the card space, we generally run the processing engines, sort of like the front end switches, a lot of that back end technology. And then we have built front end technologies for sure. John's mentioned like D1 as a great example of like our direct interaction with an end customer. But there's other places like our card controls capability. We've looked at that and we said, that actually is a pretty unique skill set that we didn't feel like we had the expertise. Zeta is a partner we use there. We go to market together with a product called Card Suite, which they've created a whole bunch of card controls. It integrates into D1 or any other digital platform that a customer may use, but it's a set of either robust SDKs or actually like white labeled, front end apps that a customer could use. I look at that as an example where we looked at it and we said, like we're really good at the backend infrastructure. We built the APIs for that client or partner to interact with, but they had just a better skill and capability in managing things like card controls or creating more robust transaction data for customers. There's a number of other ones, but I don't know, I'll let John, if you probably have a slightly different perspective, I bet.
Yeah, in the digital banking space, it's interesting because we have this history, all of FIS, right, has this history of acquisition. And when we talk to banks, a lot of times one of the questions they'll ask was, well, who did you buy that foundational technology from? And in the digital banking space, we're shifting away from the buy more to the build and partner with two new strategies. One, on the build side, we're building the foundation of our products from the ground up. And so we're leveraging some new architectures, bringing those to market in that way. But part of the strategy for that architecture was, how do you build it so that you enable partnership connectivity much more easily than we've done in the past? And even from a business model perspective, in the past, we would find a vendor or a fintech that we really liked. We would do long due diligence on them, and then we would build out a full white label integration into our product. It takes a long time, and you're making a big bet. And we're shifting from that to say, no, let's let the fintechs stand on their own name. Let's give them a platform where we can present them within the banking environment. Let's build out all of the regulatory elements so that works for the banks and the fintechs and us and the end users, et cetera. And then if we hit on a big one, we can always go back and look at that next stage of a full integration or even a buy opportunity. But for us, it's build our platforms and partner more easily and better with fintechs is kind of our strategy along that.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, John. I think we're going to be running out of time. Maybe I'll squeeze in one last question about when we look at the fintech ecosystem, right? What we see is the coming together of data, technology, speed, and innovation, and there are different models, right? So even the FIS innovation report talked about these aspects, Gen AI, as a service models, open banking and open APIs, embedded finance, and regulatory technology. So how is FIS navigating with innovative products and collaborations in this space? I mean, if there is some examples that you can share, that would be great.
You want to go first, Chris? You want me to take that one?
Which I'm happy to go first. I think we're running low on time, right, Pradesh? So maybe I'll do one of the many examples you gave.
Sure.
I think like sort of generative AI, I put in the realm of like natural language models, that type of stuff. When I think of FIS's experiences, especially in my business, like we've been using AI or neural network models for a long period of time. It's really how we do our fraud prevention work. So I'd say it's sort of like in the mix of product capabilities we have. But I think like generative AI and natural language models opens up a whole new area of potential for us, like fraud for sure. But I even go broader and I think about, I think the two use cases that people get excited about are there ways that we could solve clients' questions through generative AI, where like we could respond more accurately and faster at a lower price, and create like delightful experiences. I get a little worried about that because it all depends on how you train the models and whether or not like the data going in is right. So they can end up with sort of poor experiences, or even worse, you could end up with some like regulatory compliance issue where you like gave them a factually incorrect thing. So I get a little nervous about that, but I think I see lots of opportunity in lower cost to serve and higher quality. I'd say FIS is not quite at the point where we're like, we will deploy generative AI out in front of a customer yet, but I think we could convince ourselves. The other side of it that I get really excited about is we have like thousands of people at this company that are serving our clients. And those people suffer from the same problem our clients have, which is like, they don't understand the products. There's so much complexity behind it that in my business, especially, like we've got so many different configuration points that like no one person could ever know how a client's been deployed or what configurations and client, sort of cardholder level setups have been set. So I actually look at a lot of the generative AI capabilities. It's like if you could take natural language models and like have them learn off the configuration and documentation and sort of massive amount of information we have, I think you could far better equip a client success person to get answers to questions faster and more accurately and deliver to our clients better. And that's an area I know we're already starting to pilot and test. I think the third is like people talk about like, sort of technology and being able to like code with AI models. I think that's pretty exciting too. I find that to be like sort of taking the low-hanging fruit of development and sort of like letting our people apply their brain power to like the higher order sort of like structural architectural design, and taking sort of the burden off their back of some of the lower level tech. So sort of like three areas I get excited about with generative AI.
Okay, yeah, that's great. I think especially the customer experience thing, right, where you talked about earlier, or right now it's the number of years that they spend. That's how they gain the expertise. And now, if we can use some of the technology to kind of help them, become an expert, or at least get a great understanding of the products and support that's a great use case. Yeah, thanks, John.
Yeah, I would just say, I know we're pretty much out of time, but if there was another one that I would focus on, I would say that the open banking and open APIs is a space that in the digital banking space we're really focused on, whether it's pulling data from aggregated sources like from accounting and ERP platforms or from third-party banks, and being able to give end users better visibility into all of those data points in a way that's meaningful to them and they can drive insights. Or on the flip side, us enabling our banks with tools so that they can give more control to their end users on where their data is sent and used across all the multitude of fintechs that really would like to have access to that data. So we're kind of covering both sides of that at FIS with new solutions, and that'll be a big space that'll continue to grow.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Yeah. I think we're kind of out of time. So thank you, Chris and John, for your time today. I think we talked about a number of topics on cards, payments, money movements, CBDCs, fintech collaboration with FIS, and what FIS is looking for in partnerships and how they can actually collaborate with FIS. So hopefully this has helped put some light into what FIS is doing in the space and what are the opportunities that startups can leverage here. Again, thanks to you, Chris and John, for your time, and looking for more insightful discussions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.